The Newsagents USA.
And to his former high school football players, he was coach. Coach. And in 91 days, the nation will know Coach Walz by another name, Vice President of the United States.
That was Kamala Harris introducing Tim Walz, her running mate, to the American public. And I haven't heard roars like that at a Democrat debate event for years. Something has changed with Biden's departure and the appointment of this guy, Tim Walz, who hardly anyone knew until last night.
Tim Walz seems like a canny choice, possibly also a chemistry choice. And on paper, you can see why he makes sense. A veteran, a teacher, a coach. But it's when he starts speaking, you suddenly understand how this could change the game. Welcome to the Newsagents USA.
It's John.
It's Emily.
And I haven't seen fervour like that among Democrats since 2008, since attending Obama rallies when he was the great hope for the Democratic Party. It was absent throughout the 2016 race with Hillary Clinton. She didn't fire up an audience. There was affection for her, but there wasn't that raw enthusiasm that was on show in Philadelphia last night, and certainly with Biden. I mean, his rallies were kind of dull. I mean, such as they were, given that during 2020, it was COVID and he was in a basement in Wilmington, Delaware. And last night, the combination of Kamala Harris, who gave a very fine speech, I thought, and Tim Walz, who is kind of this from the upper Midwest. He is folksy, he is genial, and he's kind of favourite uncle figure. I thought this could be a winning combination.
Yeah, I mean, it is early days, and I think the Dems are sort of pinching themselves, quite frankly, that things have gone as well as they have so far. So we should have all sorts of caveats in everything we say. But there has certainly been a return to joyfulness, actually, and excitement, which was so lacking in the Democrat campaign until now. And I think part of the reason for Kamala Harris's pick in Tim Walz, and we know that it came down to three, really maybe only two candidates, and we'll talk about them a bit later, was that Walz looks and sounds like the kind of Trump voter that she is trying to win over. When he describes Trump voters, he describes them as his neighbours or as his family members, people he might disagree with but wants to understand. As you say, it's genial, it's jovial, it's not confrontational. It's a way of saying, these are the people I live with, live amongst, govern, and they may disagree, but I'd like to show them my way of thinking. And it's a very, very different flavour to the one you're getting from the Trump campaign right now. Again, more later. But I think that helps to explain why she came down on the side of Walz, maybe not Shapiro, why she saw this guy as somebody who was happy to be her number two, didn't have big presidential ambitions himself, has kind of lived a good life. You know, he's been a senator in Minnesota for 12 years. He's been the Army veteran. He's been a governor already since, he's a second term governor now. And so he's someone who's kind of reached 60 and probably doesn't need to put his own ambitions first, is quite happy to be whatever she needs him to be right now.
Well, I think that is a very important point. I think his lack of ego and lack of kind of ambition to be the top dog, to be the president, is something that she found appealing in him. He was saying, look, if you want me to walk through a brick wall, I will. I know I'm going to have to do ugly work. I know I'm going to have to get my hands dirty. I'm here to do whatever you need me to do, to be your backup, to be your support. I will have your back. I think that was very appealing to Kamala Harris, so that she wasn't already looking over her shoulder and thinking, hang on, are you already after my job? The thing about Josh Shapiro, I mean, he gave the warm-up speech last night, and it was an absolute barnstorming.
He's the governor of Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
the other guy who was in the race.
Yeah, the governor of Pennsylvania. So the rally was in Philadelphia. And my word, he can deliver a speech like Obama can deliver a speech, and is very formidable. And I still think he will be playing a big role in the campaign, because why wouldn't you have as many voices as you can? And as we have discussed before, Philadelphia is kind of ground zero. This is the key swing state that must be won by the Democrats if they're to have a path. But it's also just, I mean, you can go through the CV of Tim Walz, and you've done that, Emily. You know, the public school teacher, you know, American context of public school, kind of a state school teacher doing, you know, social studies and geography for 20 years, Army veteran. He was in the US, you know, National Guard. But you look at him, his physical appearance, his physical manifestation. He goes around everywhere with a camouflage hat on. Why? Because in his spare time, he goes out shooting. He goes out fishing. This allies himself much better to middle America, to working class blue collar America, than probably Josh Shapiro would, or any of the other people that had been named. He just seems to embody that kind of definition of what middle America is.
Well, if you are trying to understand the presidential strategy, look no further than the merch, because at the rally last night, that camouflage hunting hat had been turned into the first bit of merchandise that said Harris Walz on it. And that is not a coincidence, because not only does he look like your average American, he reminds everyone that he is a gun owner. He loves ice fishing. He has, in his own words, shot more pheasant than J.D. Vance. And I think what Kamala Harris may have been doing partially with this pick was saying, you know what? We've probably got the women's vote already. You know, she's made huge leaps and bounds into getting young women on side. She's got women in terms of reproductive rights, women on abortion issues already, she thinks. But what about bringing the guys back? What about getting somebody out who says it's okay to be a gun owner? It's okay to be the guy that might attend a Trump rally. It's okay to be the guy that wears the baseball cap. And suddenly you realize that she's choosing the guy's guy to help her fight in, as you said, these absolute battleground states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, the kind of places that Trump took in 2016 that made it really difficult for the Democrats to win back last time round. And if she thinks that Tim Walz helps her pull back some of the male vote, and, you know, I say that it's kind of slightly tongue-in-cheek, but I think there is something in it, you know, that Trump has always exuded this sense of strength. And remember that banner that he produced on the last day of his Republican convention? Trump equals strength, Biden equals weakness. She's going, okay, right, we're changing things up. Here's a guy that you can relate to who wears a hunting hat because he actually goes hunting. He owns a gun. Now will you listen? And maybe that's the strategy with him.
Well, we should probably have a listen, because the character of the man does come through, and it came through in the address he gave last night. I mean, what brought him to prominence, what brought him to attention, was his description of Trump and J.D. Vance.
You know it, you feel it. These guys are creepy and, yes, just weird as hell. That's what you see. That's what you see.
You see, he doesn't do it with anger. He does it with a kind of laugh in his voice. And that is very much part of the appeal. I suppose the other thing we've got to do, though, is to move from character, which I think we have described, to policy. Because what is clearly being done among Republican circles is to try to tie him to a whole load of left-wing causes and say, what Kamala did yesterday was choose somebody who is of the left. She has she's caved into the progressives in the Democratic Party by choosing Tim Walz. And here was a guy who came into Congress originally as a sort of rather moderate, representing a rural district in Minnesota, and has since became governor and took control of all the kind of the assembly in Minnesota, has actually pushed the Democratic Party there way to the left, and has apparently, you know, he supports way out policies like giving kids free school meals and things like that. I mean, can you imagine that poor kids should be able to eat food at lunchtime? But there are a number of other things where the Republicans are saying this is left-wing, he is woke, he's part of the trans agenda and all of that.
Yeah. I mean, his policies, as a former union member, we should say as well, I think are unashamedly progressive. He talks about free school meals, increasing minimum wages, increasing teacher salaries, family tax credits. He's also been very outspoken on abortion rights, but I think the language that he uses is very carefully chosen. So last night at the rally, he talked about opponents of, abortion rights, not as neighbours disagreeing. And he didn't explicitly reference women's rights, but he ended with this rousing reminder that what each family chooses to do is nobody else's goddamn business. He is very much of the left, and I think he's unapologetic, as you say, about feeding, hungry kids. But he's also managed to find a language which appeals to people who might just hate all politicians and want to hear somebody just say, get the state out of my life. It's none of your goddamn business. If you turn that into a policy on abortion, it means stop interfering in women's reproductive rights. And it's a cleverer sell than somebody standing there trying to explain, weeks and terms and all the rest of it, which I think a more academic approach would have done. Will this become a millstone for him? Obviously, I think Trump and Vance at the moment are slightly reeling from the choice and trying to work out their line of attack. And yes, they will call him a socialist, and they will say it's going to be a socialist agenda, and they've got to find the terms on which to fight them. But I guess most of the things that he's sort of signed up to are things that Democrats have already pledged and want and are happy to see. So I don't think there are any shocks in this. I guess what we're talking about is how wide he can stretch the net. And I think he will do that by the choice of his language, even if his policies might, to some people, be too far of the left. As I say, he's not ashamed about them. So I don't know if it's not like he's kind of running around saying defund the police, right? He's running around saying feed kids.
But I think that's the clever bit of it, if the Democrats play it well. The clever bit is that we have sort of delineated this discussion so far in let's talk about the character, let's talk about the policy. Yeah. In character, it's going to bring in, hopefully for Democrats, older, whiter, male, voters who have probably been seduced by Trump but might be won back by this gun owner, shooter, hunting, fishing, shooting guy. In terms of policy, it cements younger voters because they think, here is a guy who has done stuff in Minnesota that I quite like the look of. And if he's going to be the VP pick, then I quite fancy that. And even though I may have some doubts about Kamala Harris, and I thought she did a very good speech last night. I thought it was measured for the occasion. Yeah, she's travelled light on policy. Yeah, what's she going to do about the southern border? Yeah, the economy. And those are things that obviously she's going to have to talk a lot more about in the 90 days. But if you're sending a signal to younger voters that this ticket is much more solid, maybe not quite as pro-Israel as it could have seemed if it was Josh Shapiro who'd been on the ticket, who is Jewish and unashamedly pro-Israel, then I think that possibly you are getting a win-win there where you need to build out support, strengthen, solidify support among young people and also build out support among those groups that have stayed away from you.
I also think there's a little bit of mischief to Walz, which he can afford to show as the VP. She cannot afford to go there. So I'm going to reference, you're laughing because you know what
I know where you're going with this. And I've been debating how we are going to explain this particular line that we're probably about to hear from a Walz speech.
And I got to tell you, I can't wait to debate the guy. That is, if he's willing to get off the couch and show up. So,
Oh, Maitlis, I cannot wait for you to explain the couch reference.
So on the surface, all he said is, come and meet me at the debate. Get off your sofa and come and join me. But as many of you will know, there has been a viral meme going round, completely false, that suggests egregious sexual acts that JD Vance has been performing with his own sofa. As I say, nothing proven, I mean, distinctly not proven. And yet, Walz is walking into the territory of the Gen Zers here, you know, the people who understand exactly what he's talking about, what he's referring to. And I was looking at Kamala Harris's face as he said that, and she's kind of contorted. She's thinking, oh my God, he went there. And she's also thinking, is this funny or do I have to, you know, back him off? I think there is a bit of mischief there, which he can probably get away with for now, as long as it's not turned into a kind of like, why are the Dems spreading disinformation, misinformation? That's not very classy. But I think there was another picture actually that I'm going to reference, which is him stroking a cat. Now, you know, it sounds a bit Austin Powers until you realise it's just a very avuncular picture of a guy stroking a cat. But compare that to the guy that he wants to debate, JD Vance, right? Who has already come out with this crazy, horrific label, you know, for people that don't have kids as childless cat ladies. And he's standing there going, yeah, I'm the cat guy, you know, bring it on. So I think he has got this element of mischief. He knows exactly what he's doing.
Emily, can I just say that in the 1960s there were those judges that heard, criminal offences against the Rolling Stones or the Beatles and would describe them in court as a popular musical act. I think your description of an egregious encounter with a sofa
with latex gloves.
Exactly that. Look, we're going to come back after the break and we're going to talk about the Trump-Vance reaction. At the moment, in Trump land, and I've read this on kind of one of the kind of well-informed kind of blogs, that in Trump land they're trying to say, we are so thrilled it's Tim Walz and not Josh Shapiro. Now, he was the guy we were really scared of. He'd have given us huge problems, but Walz, it's going to be a waltz in the park because we are going to be able to beat this guy. We're going to be able to do it easily. He is nothing to us. Methinks they do protest too much.
So the big question is, how does Vance respond to this brand new pairing, Harris-Walz? At the moment, I think it's fair to say they're not entirely sure. They are trying everything. They're throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what insult sticks. And right now, it's not entirely clear what that will be.
Well, we got a little flavour of it from Donald Trump last night. And I think rather than try to characterise it, it's probably best if I simply read it out, what he posted. Here we go. What are the chances that crooked Joe Biden, the worst president in the history of the US, whose presidency was unconstitutionally stolen from him by Kamala, Barack Hussein Obama, crazy Nancy Pelosi, shifty Adam Schiff, crying Chuck Schumer, and others on the lunatic left, crashes the Democrat National Convention and tries to take back the nomination, beginning with challenging me to another debate. He feels that he made a historical, tragical mistake by handing over the US presidency, etc., etc., etc. So I think what Donald Trump is trying to say in that tweet is, please, Joe Biden, come back in and let me fight you and not have to fight Kamala Harris, because I know you really want to come back into the race. So let's let the old boys do it. Let the old boys sort it out amongst themselves. 78-year-old versus the 81-year-old. That would be much better than me having to fight Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I mean, just in factual terms, when he asked what are the chances that crooked Joe Biden will come back, the chances are zero, literally zero. That will not happen. But I think, I mean, he sounds very uncomfortable, I'm going to say. He sounds like a sort of Scooby-Doo villain in a suit of armour who's had the helmet ripped off and says, if it wasn't for those pesky kids, I might have got away with it. You know, he sounds like the guy who thought he had the election in the bag until suddenly he didn't. And I think this as ever with Trump, these dawning realizations come out real time on social media in his posts. And so you don't really have to do a whole therapy session on, I wonder what Trump is really thinking. It's there. He's annoyed. He's really cross. He's trying to throw everything at Biden to urge him back into the race, which can't happen. And it kind of suggests that he hasn't really formulated an attack line for Harris. He hasn't really decided how he's going to attack Walz, except for the sort of socialism stuff. It'll be really interesting. I mean, I don't doubt they will come up with something. They will, the sort of Oppo dump or whatever will begin. They will find dirty secrets in everyone's past, and that will be made very vocal, not least because most people don't know Tim Walz. 70% of Americans have no idea who he is. So there is plenty of opportunity for Trump to either discover or, dare I say, create, disseminate, share, falsify stuff about a man if they want to try and make out that he is of a disreputable character. But at the moment, it's kind of weak sauce.
So the other thing that's happening, I think, from what I can gather, is that Trump himself has just gone off on one. And the Republican Party is trying to bring him back and say, stop the playground insults, stop the personal attacks, stop the kind of, the very highly personalized stuff. Focus on policy, focus on where the Democrats are vulnerable, focus on the southern border, focus on what's happened on the stock market, focus on these issues that Americans care about. Stop calling Kamala Kamabla. Stop talking about Barack Hussein Obama. We know where you stand on those things. You have got to come back to focusing on policy, otherwise this election will be lost. And the question is, can you corral Donald Trump? Which is a question that has been asked for the last 8 years or so, since he's been, since he was last got elected president of the United States. And it's very unclear that people will or be able to do that, because that is what you need to do right now. Because I think that the more the insults are being hurled, it might kind of appeal to your base and it might make them chortle and laugh and all the rest of it. Are you going to win back the voters you need? Are you going to build out your support so you solidify in those key swing states? And at the moment, I think an awful lot of Republicans are feeling deeply concerned about the direction that Trump is travelling in, and they don't know whether this is a temporary spasm out of fury that Biden is out of the race, or because there's something more profound going on that he just can't let this go.
Look, if you look back to the Republican convention, right, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, maybe.
It must feel like 3 years ago.
Seriously. But what I remember from that time was how incredibly effectively, tightly it had been run. And Donald Trump at that time was really listening to his key people, Susie Wiles, Chris Lasavita, Stephen Chung. We saw all these guys. They were very visible. We were kind of having lunch in the same sort of, places as them. Jason Miller. They had got that campaign running smoothly. And Trump was doing what he was told. And I feel that since the whole shift, the Kamala shift, he's kind of stopped listening to them. And we saw him at the Association of Black Journalists convention. Do you remember when he goes off on one, he accuses Kamala Harris of not really being black? And you can kind of feel them sort of thinking, oh God, like, oh, now what? Oh, it's like they've slightly lost control of their bear cub. I mean, I don't want to mention bear cubs now for other reasons, but it's like he's gone off on one and he's returned to being the sort of 2016 Trump, as opposed to the, quite, what's the word? Sort of quite somber, quite sober man that we saw during the Republican focused, and the guy who just missed a bullet and was grateful for his life and wanted to lower the tone and speak gently, that's all gone. That's completely gone. And you do wonder whether he's still got the old team around him and not the team that is kind of preparing him to fight a brand new match.
Well, I think that is the challenge for the Republican. I just as kind of add to something I read, I think yesterday, was that the Republicans are now putting in a big spend on advertising in North Carolina. What on earth are the Republicans spending in North Carolina? It's only twice in the last 50 years that it has gone Democrat. You only spend money in states where you think you can win or you think you're going to lose. Otherwise, you don't bother. If the map is widening so that the Republicans think that North Carolina is in play, that is the physical manifestation of the concern that is felt in the Republican Party that Harris has changed the game with her pick of walls and what that might bring in the future.
And on the other side, Kamala Harris has now upped her campaign team. She's brought in a lot of former Obama people. She's brought in a lot of the sort of early Biden people. She's really kind of increased the people who know how to win a presidency, in other words. And I think that has spooked people as well, because they're now looking, as you said, they're looking more like the 2008 team. I mean, nobody is saying at this point that Kamala Harris is going to do in 2024 what Barack Obama did in 2008. But they are kind of getting the same ducks in a row to fight the campaign in the same style as if they could. And I think that visually is quite a threat.
Well, a moment ago, Maitlis, you spoke about bears. And you said, I'm not going to speak
Your
about...
turn. You go.
When we come back from the break, we're going to be talking about the third party candidate, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. We're going to find a new definition of the word weird, and it all refers to a dead bear found in New York's Central Park. So Robert F. Kennedy does sort of present an unquantifiable threat in this presidential election, because polling data has shown him sort of sometimes at 15% or thereabouts, and that could have a huge impact. There's a question over who it's going to hurt most. Is it going to hurt the Democrats? He is a Kennedy. Or is it going to hurt Trump because he is a conspiracy theorist and is an anti-vaxxer and has said a whole pile of things that might appeal to Trump supporters? We've heard that Tim Walz' great line when he really caught to attention was his description of J.D. Vance and Donald Trump as weird. Well, there's nothing as weird as the whole story of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I mean, he was upstate New York. He has a brush with a bear, I think, kind of in a car. His mates are all smashed.
Wait. How do you have a brush with a bear? How do you have a brush with a bear? I mean, what are you saying? He ran over the bear? He didn't run over the bear? I thought this was all in Central Park.
Well, let us hear from Mr. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. himself.
I was taking a group of people falconing up in Goshen, New York, up in the Hudson Valley. And I was supposed to meet them there at like maybe 8 or 9. I was driving up maybe, really early, like 7. And that woman in a van in front of me hit a bear and killed it, a young bear. So I pulled over and I picked up the bear and put him in the back of my van because I was going to skin the bear. And it was very good condition, and I was going to put the meat in my refrigerator. And you can do that in New York City. You can get a bear tag for a roadkill bear. And so then we went hawking, and I had the bear in my car. And then we had a really good day, and we went late. We were catching a lot of game, and the people really loved it, so we stayed late. And instead of going back to my home in Westchester, I had to go right to the city because there was a dinner at Peter Luger's Steakhouse. And at the end of the dinner, it went late, and I realized I couldn't go home. I had to go to the airport. And the bear was in my car, and I didn't want to leave the bear in the car because that would have been bad.
I mean, this revelation was made in a video he posted himself, sitting at a kitchen table, telling Roseanne Barr, I'm just going to say that again, RFK Jr. telling Roseanne Barr about an event that, just to remind listeners, happened a decade ago. Okay, there has been an unsolved mystery of a baby bear cub carcass in Central Park that has been miraculously explained now by the man who willingly admits he has a worm in his own brain.
Well, honestly, it's sort of, I mean, if that isn't the dictionary definition of batshit fucking crazy, I don't know what is the definition of that because, oh my word, it is nuts. I don't know whether to draw attention to the fact how old he sounds, how nuts it is, what they were doing, why they dumped a bear's body, skinning the bear, because I fancied skinning it and then putting bear meat in the fridge.
Really
I mean, everything about it, Emily. None of it is normal. None of it is normal. And yet, this is the person who could have a very decisive impact on the outcome of November's presidential election. I mean, it's just bonkers.
And on that note, we will leave you. But it has been fun. See you next week.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Newsagents USA.